last up, this is our last panel of the day. I really hope you guys have enjoyed the past 2 days of panels. I know I have. They've been incredibly informative, and I'd like to thank all the panelists and the moderators we've had for the past 2 days. You guys have been incredible. So without further ado, our last panel is urgent action for long-term success. Our panelists are Rida Lababidi, Chairman and CEO of Purple Capital Group. Rida is the eldest member of a 100-year-old family business established in 1920 in Manchester, England. The business concentrated on textile trading between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, but then they later expanded into the motor vehicle distribution of Nissan and Datsun. Then Mr. Omar Al Qattan is the founding member of AM Qattan Foundation and the chairman of Al Hani Construction and Trading. Mr. Omar Al Qattan has a very interesting background. He studied film directing in Brussels. His first film, Dreams and Silence, an early exploration of political Islam, won the prestigious 1991 Joris Evans Award. He also produced Michael Khalifa's Tales of Three Jewels that was shot entirely in Gaza Strip. That must have been very interesting. We also have engineer Raja Al-Zayani, who was with us yesterday. She has over 20 years of experience in strategy and management. She's a key speaker at numerous national events, and she also helped the Ministry of Works reach some global standards. And our final panelists is Ms. Hala Farouk Al-Muayyad, Executive Director of Al-Muayyad Contracting Group, and moderating this session is Ersoy. Ersoy, it's kind of hard to pronounce. I'm really sorry. I can't. Ersoy. Okay, it's really hard for me to pronounce it. I'm gonna have to admit you on and ask you how to pronounce the name. Okay, so let's start letting people in. Mr. Omar, promote the panelist. I don't know. Ersoy, you're gonna have to tell me how to pronounce that name. Okay, Mr. Rida Lababidi. Okay, PA to, okay, Ms. Hala Farouk is not here. Raja Zayani. Okay, Greg Hurton, that's a mistake. That's okay.
Hi there.
Hi, Mr. Omar, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, tamam. How are you?
I'm glad to see you.
Hala Muhammad, hala.
Like seeing your resume, I felt refreshed. We have a film director in our midst.
X.
X.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm really good. Okay, we have.
I have
one
a question.
more missing.
Can we access the recordings of yesterday's panels by any chance?
Definitely. I'm going to talk to Mr. Muhammad about that. We are missing one more person, who is Hala Farouk Al-Muayyad, and I just saw her be in. She's not here at the moment. Okay, I'm going to admit her the moment she gets in. Go ahead, guys. Thank you very much for being here.
Good afternoon. Are we starting, Sura? This is Ersoy.
Yes, Mr. Ersoy. So, Mr. Ersoy, what's your last name? How do you pronounce it?
Oh, okay. It's a difficult. I'm Turkish. Erkazancı. Because we have a
Erkazancı.
Yes, Erkazancı. Yes.
Erkazancı. Okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Ersoy.
So are we good to go?
Yeah, you're good to go. Let's get started then.
Sorry. Okay.
No.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last panel of today, Urgent Action for Long-Term Success. My name is Ersoy Erkazancı, and I will be the moderator of this panel. I am the correspondent of Bloomberg HT. I am living in Dubai for 6 years now, and previously 17 years I was in asset management, wealth management business, both buy side and sell side in Turkey.
Mm.
Now we have very valuable panelists today, and welcome everyone. What are we going to talk about today? How family offices can navigate the current crisis and aftermath, cutting your losses, where to invest or where to take profit, and is there any emerging opportunities with the pandemic? So today we are going to talk about this. So I have now it should be 4, but now I think we are 3 available guests. So let me introduce you briefly, but I'll ask you to introduce yourself more in detail. I'll just tell your name and your companies. Raja Alzayani, S&P PNB Managing Director and Strategy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Omar Al-Kattan, he is the founding member and of Kattan Foundation and chair of Al-Hani Construction. Hello, Omar.
Hello, Ersan.
And Rida Lababedi, he is the chairman and CEO of Purple Capital Group. Hello, Rida, welcome.
Oh, hello, thank you.
Thank you. Since today's International Women's Day, I want to congratulate Raja and I want to give the first word to you.
Thank you so
Raja,
much.
when I look at your CV, I mean, we have done lots of successful things, but I have catch the word strategy a lot. I mean, you are really an expert about strategy. So if you want to tell us about, first of all, little by yourself, maybe a touch on Women's Day and why strategy is important, long-term strategy is important, especially in these times of COVID. Raja, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, my name is Raja Zani, as you have just said. Thank you so much for having me in this forum. I'm delighted to be really here with you today, and especially today at the Women International Day. I really am proud of what we have come up to, especially in Bahrain. And in this last 30 years, there has been like a jump in the position of women. I came from an institute. I was working with an institute before. And I remember the first day when I joined that institute, I was like a newly engaged engineer, just graduated from the US, and was surprised by the head of the organization saying, okay, women engineers, please be aware that your position will not be more than a chief of a group. We don't have directors as women. And it was really shocking for me. But today, when I left that organization almost now 7 or 6 years ago, 40% of the top management are women. So this is what I meant. We have really jumped a lot in regard to that. As of your next question, sorry, your second question was?
But about strategy, I mean, because you, when I read you are an expert in strategy, and why is the strategy important, especially for a long-term success?
Yes. My expertise in strategy has come out from my work. As you have just mentioned, I have like more than 20 years working with strategy. And when I meant working with the strategy, I meant like developing the strategy for the organization in terms of strategic planning and in terms of all the background that will go with it, in terms of doing the plan itself and execution as well. So the whole cycle. Maybe my biggest achievement has come from being with an organization whom I have developed the strategy to, and I have seen the realization of that vision. The vision that we have done for the organization 10 years back, I have been witnessing its realization to its ultimate goals. This is really that strength of, or the practitioner part that I have. Of course, I am certified as the first person in the world in practicing strategy and successfully practicing strategy, from the creator of the Balanced Scorecard. If you ever heard about it, it's one of the most successful tools or framework for strategy. Those are the founders of the strategy. So this is about me, but about strategy itself and why it is important nowadays. I think during the last year, we have witnessed a very strange situation. It is really something that is that has got us all from our comfort zone. It is a big change for all of us. And with this big change, any organization would need a solid foundation that it has to move from and an aspiration that it should work to. I know the game is changing, but this is the beauty of the strategy. And I'm talking in here about agile strategy, a strategy that should move on with whatever is changing in our atmosphere, whether it is outside the organization or inside the organization. That's how important it is. With calculated risk, we can really maneuver our way in this world. We can really uh, provide the success or provide the whatever goals that we have put in our front. This is what I have to give by now, but of course I will be with you during the whole session, and we will see as we go on how I tackle all the rest of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja, for your comments. I mean, one of the things that you said, I quoted because I read it one other place. You said game has changed. Before, people were using the word, the sentence, the rule of the game has changed. But this time, I think with the pandemic, the game itself has changed.
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you, Raja. Now I want to come to Omar. And Omar, when I read your CV, I mean, what a wonderful CV. You have lots of different heads, like film producing, books. Can you tell us about a little bit about yourself? And also, I want to ask you, I mean, what should be the role of between the state and the private sector? How can both help each other, especially these kind of times?
Thank you very much. Thank you again for inviting me to this panel. Yeah, I have an eccentric background, maybe reflecting a somewhat indecisive person who wants to do too many things. But one thing that for sure is that I've worked across both the private and the public sector. I continue to do so. So I run a construction and contracting company in Kuwait. On the one hand, so I deal in the private sector very much, and on the other, in the charitable, non-profit sector. And I think one of the things that has been, well, several things have been highlighted by the pandemic. First of all, where success in treating the pandemic has occurred is where the public sector has been strongest. So if we take the UK, the government, which is a very liberal government, had all its kind of thinking focused on getting the private sector to act quickly to attend to the problems of COVID. But in fact, the two institutions that were able to really make a difference were the University of Oxford and its research, which led to the AstraZeneca vaccination, but also most importantly, the National Health Service. And without the National Health Service, we would not have in the UK the kind of extraordinary rate of inoculation, of vaccination that we've had so far. The other issues that have been raised in Kuwait, where this has been aggravated, it's a rich country which should not really have these problems, is in education. Countries which had a weak public education system suffered greatly. So in Kuwait, schools were closed for very, very long periods of time. And the social and mental health consequences of this are very, very grave. And I don't think we're going to see the results, the outcomes for a while. I mean, we will see them gradually, unfortunately. And my feeling is that we need to really revisit some of the orthodoxies of the last 20, 25 years of liberal economics, which of course have benefited us as private sector. But we must remember that without a strong public sector, there is no society, and therefore there's no economy, and therefore there is no private sector. And that's why I really think it's so critical that we lobby governments across the world, whether in the richer countries or the less rich countries, to marshal their resources to support especially education, healthcare, public education, and public healthcare, and of course support for small businesses, because this is also vital. Without the furlough, I don't know if you're familiar with the support that the government here gave to the small businesses and all businesses, I don't think we could have survived. So very, very critical that, you know, eminent families in the Gulf, and we're talking about the Gulf here especially, lobby the government against, maybe against their interests, against our interests, but in the long term in favor of our interests, to really strengthen the public sector. It's vital. Without it, we cannot face another COVID.
Mr. Ersoy, I'd like to just a quick heads up. Ms. Hala Al-Muayyad just joined the panel.
Okay, welcome, Hala. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
Thank you, thank you. Before you came, we were talking about International Women's Day. Congratulations about it.
Thank you.
I'd like to celebrate.
Thank you so much.
So I don't know, should we continue with? Yes, I want to continue with you since you are with us. I mean, when I read your CV, I've seen lots of things about, like, I catch the words environment and sustainability and social. Especially with the pandemic, we have realized the importance of environment. Everybody started talking about environment. Maybe you can tell us as a company what you are doing about the environment and social, and also tell us about a little bit about your group.
Offices, like you can see. Just one second. I'll go somewhere a bit quiet. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, beautiful weather today in Bahrain, so I decided to take my meetings outdoor. So I just so basically you were discussing about the environment. Obviously, there's a lot of you know, with the pandemic, there's a lot of things which I think that we've been affected socially and mentally. A lot of people are affected during this time. But generally, our company, in terms of the environment and incorporating it into our daily lives, I think it's a very, very important part of our move in our organization. And we're really trying to bring on sustainability through, you know, incorporating solar panels socially, and having less, you know, more energy efficient tools to enable our customers to be able to get a better experience. So I think we're very close to that in terms of an organization, and trying to be very progressive in terms of the country's development. So it's an ongoing process, but it needs everyone to move to the same mindset and improve the mindset. So that's a little bit of a background.
Thank you, Hala. Now I want to jump into Rida. Welcome, Rida.
Hi.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Purple Capital Group? And also I read that you have a charity, Purple Charity. Also Ömer mentioned about education, importance of education. So with the, you know, with the crisis, some of the sectors did not do well. I am living in Dubai, like hospitality, tourism, really affected badly. But if you look at digital transformation or online shopping, they grow. So what about education, or what are the new opportunities emerged with the pandemic?
Okay, well, thank you for receiving me, and thank you everybody for your comments. Very interesting. I'll just give you a little bit of background. As it was mentioned, our family is 100 years old. And the fact that we're 100 years old has put us through systems that we would never believe possible. The pandemic being one of them. But we've gone through 2 world wars. We've gone through Vietnam War. We've gone through Indonesian, nationalization, confiscation. You name the problem, I think we've gone through it. And the one element that came out of it is the hardest, you were saying about game, which the hardest part of the game is to last the longest. not to be the biggest. To last the longest, we have to use absolutely everything that was already mentioned by my esteemed colleagues, Omar, Raja, Hala. All these elements, I agree with each one of them, are crucial to us surviving whatever comes our way. I'd like to put a little note of positivity. Whatever has come our way in the past, we have surmounted and we've come out even bigger. And that is thanks to education. That is thanks to society. That is thanks to the government being also involved. Now, that's if you want a little bit of our background. In our family, everyone has to prove themselves. Nobody gets a chance just because they're a nephew, a son, or an uncle or something. Best man for the job, which we believe is a predicament for any business or any structure that has to have a leader. The best man for the job, no matter where he comes from, no matter what his name is, no matter what sex he is, the best man or woman for the job, excuse me. I meant that when I said the best man for the job. As far as emerging opportunities, thanks to the pandemic, there's a lot of things that have come out. One that we have particularly hit in, we've realized, and in one of the comments that is written, it's saying, how would we work with the new information that we're getting? What are the new investment opportunities we're getting? What we've seen, and I wouldn't want to talk about technology today, but I'd like to talk about main business. Our aim at Purple Capital is to take Business Street to Main Street. And the way we're doing it is a lot of commercial banks, be it in the US, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, have exited certain financial spaces. And many, many businesses are suffering from it. This is an unexpected investment for us, as we are now acting as a bank for companies such as trade finance, fintech, shipping building, properties, which are investments that everyone can understand because it's your everyday business. Of course, you need to be a strategist. Of course, you need the experience and the education. But it is also a place where we're now deriving substantial income and working hand in hand with the governments in the countries we're in. And I'll give a little example, then I'll leave it back to the panel. We have created a company to supply food to Africa. As you can imagine, with the pandemic, that was a pretty good idea because our products were not blocked in any ports and the freedom of food was going back and forth. In Sierra Leone, we, rather than go through the main towns, we created very small stores where we took simply 2 containers, put some cement around it, put someone there, and sold our flour, rice, sugar in these little shops, if you like. 2 containers, shipping containers. The idea was the Sierra Leoneans will be able to come and buy their necessities without crowding in a major area in a capital, which will immediately help the COVID to not be spreading so fast. With that we established at the beginning of last year, the government did write to us, thanking us for what we did, and is ready to talk to us for future ways to help the population get what they need, educate their population, and keep them from the pandemic. I'll leave it at that and turn it back to the panel.
Thank you, Rida. Raja, I want to come back to you. I mean, if you have any comments with the previous talks, please feel free to comment about this. But also I want to ask you about mental resilience and operational resilience. I mean, in this period, both companies and the people who are working have to be resilient and also have to be agile. How can a company or a government can be mentally resilient or operational resilient?
Well, when we say resilient, it means that we have actually studied the atmosphere that we have inside the organization and outside the organization, as I have indicated before. The resilience will come when we have calculated our risk and we have prepared ourselves for what is coming up. In the old way of doing strategy, it used to be a long-term strategic plan, and you need to visit it maybe like on a yearly basis or biannual or something like that. In the new world, to be more resilient, you would have to have these assessments on smaller intervals. You would have to assess, you would have to adapt, and you would have to sustain again. And when I say you would have to assess, of course, you will take on board all what is happening around you, all the factors, all the information, all the news that might be of informative or that might be of use for your business, whatever that business is. Then you would have to adapt it by some way of innovation. And I will speak in here about the usual, or actually most of the families in the Gulf. They have like 5 or 6 sectors that they are spreading in. Most of these sectors are like traditional sectors. Okay, we are not against the traditional sectors. Of course, we will always be needing these. You name it, maybe real estate or construction or trading, but we really need to innovate in that. Innovate in terms of the productions that they are producing, innovate in terms of the way they are doing their business, innovate in terms of the delivery of that service that they are providing or that production that they are providing. And then sustain. Sustain means that you will have your strategic plan to refer to and to sustain it with whatever you have learned during that process or that change that you have incorporated now. So this is what I meant by being resilient. And it really goes with agility. It is the agile strategy. And agile strategy is a strategy that has been used by some companies, some big organizations actually in the world. And it has proven to save many, I would say billions of dollars for that organization in particular. So it is not something that we are coming up with. It has been like experimented with. It has been word proven. So this is the strategic fit, the agility, the resilience. It all comes into one thing. So this is what I meant by resilient.
Thank you, Raja. Omar, Raja mentioned about innovation, and it brings me to my mind that now, especially in the Gulf region, they are trying to diversify their economies and running away from fossil fuels and trying to get to more green economy maybe. So how do you see this? What are the governments doing? What are the challenges with this new time?
Well, obviously the economies, the big economies in the Gulf especially have become so dependent on fossil fuels that it's very difficult to disengage themselves and to plan. But they are, I mean, I think maybe the smaller countries have been more successful at because they are less, or the poorer countries like Bahrain and Dubai rather than the whole of the UAE and to a certain extent, parts of the private sector in Kuwait. But I think that it needs to be less shy. It needs to be strategic, like the previous esteemed speaker said. And I think that it needs to be more focused, not just on alternative sources of energy, but I think on realigning the economy away from the public, the huge investment in salaries. For example, in Kuwait, we have like 96% of our workforce is in government, to retraining in new industries that are going to have the smallest chance of becoming export industries for countries that have really no resources apart from fossil fuels. So it's a huge challenge, and I don't really have the answer. In contracting and engineering, you can work on a lot of green solutions, on greater efficiency, for example, on converting your fleet of vehicles to electrical, on ensuring that the design specs of all your work is up to environmental standards, international standards and so on. But in the end, and we go back to what I was saying at the beginning, without a concerted investment from the public sector in these alternative energies, but also in retraining its relatively young population, then I'm very worried.
If I may step in here, excuse me for a minute. Well, you know that most of the Gulf states has really taken into their vision. Most of them, they have the vision of 2030. And each of the Gulf states has like a target so that they will deploy this much solar energy into their targets. They will minimize the fossil fuel by so and so. So these restrictions and the policies would really, compel the private sector as well as the government itself to invest more into renewable energy. So this is one of the incentives that we have now, these restrictions policies. Plus, of course, Paris Agreement, which is limiting the emission of carbon dioxide. So that's both of them are really a good really push towards renewable energies. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Hala, how did this pandemic change the way of doing business in your job, in your family office?
I think us, we're mostly into construction and electromechanical services and interiors. So we were actually one of the first cases in the private sector in Bahrain to be affected. And we had a lot of changes to the labor camps, our people moving between each other. We had, and we were the first company to register 1,000 cases of COVID within the first 4 months of operating in Bahrain. So it was extremely challenging. We worked very closely with the government. And I think, it's brought to light how important health is, how important, having mental checks is for the people working within the organization. And it even brought to light a lot of, I think, for people how to, deal with each other and how to give each other enough room around this pandemic situation, working together, working from home. There's been a lot of changes in our organization, which I think are very beneficial. And so it's been a constant change to the scene of how people are working, a change to the scene of how people are living. And I think it's still an ongoing process that we're learning from day by day and adapting to. So it's been extremely challenging time. A lot of clients don't want to meet. So we've obviously taken the move, like I think Mr. Rada said earlier, is that, the move to moving electronically has really been pushed by this pandemic. But I would also like to say, I like your ideas about, Omar, about the change in, innovation and how much, the country needs to really put into the private sector, and how the change in, expenditure of governments really needs to move in that way. That's something that really needs to be adapted by our local governments in the Gulf, and that mind process and the change in the process of thinking, entrepreneurship, education, that's all something that's, comes from the grassroots. So I think that's a really important message to take from this panel and from this conversation. And like Mr. Zayani said about the, having people who are innovative, agile, and having that sustainability is also very, very important. So I'd like to put that across, and I hope we'll be able to, everybody on this panel and otherwise, be able to sustain and be agile during this pandemic, which is extremely important to the development of our nations.
Did you have to stop any investments, or did you start any new investments in this period? I mean, do you have to make sharp decisions, quick decisions?
I think in terms of investments, stopping investments or starting new investments, we haven't been extremely active in this because we've been, we have a very big sales force and team. So just dealing with the pandemic has been a bit of a challenge in terms of, reorganizing our strengths and reorganizing our people. So we haven't been successful as others on this panel in that, but maybe in the future for sure.
Okay, Hala. Rida, before coming into you, I mean, something is I want to mention, because we talk about this technology and like old economy and coming with the new economy. In Dubai, they are trying to promote this innovation and accelerators, startups a lot. And it's interesting to see like traditional sectors, like for example, construction. Now they use, prop tech with education, ed tech, health tech. So what I like is before we were just hearing fintech a lot, but now you see technology and other traditional sectors coming together. Recently, one of my friends told me that he's going to an event called ShipTech. He's working in shipping industry. So it's interesting. I wanted to share with you. So Rida, what are your thoughts about this previous conversation?
Well, one of the questions you asked, Hala, was, did anything change in your business? And I must say, in our business, our real estate arm, due to the pandemic and due to the e-commerce that was coming out, and I joined now, Raja, in what she was saying, that the strategy has to be flexible and constantly looked at. We, for example, in real estate have come out of all our commercial properties. For the first time in 20 odd years, we don't have any commercial properties today. But where we did invest, and we never did before, was residential, which is a complete change of strategy. Our strategy was to use commercial properties like a bond. We borrow from the bank 70%, 60%. We rent it to a AAA tenant for the next 15 years, and we just turn it around. But when you see the amount of money being saved by the likes of Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, etc., by having people working from their homes, there seems to be a predicament on commercial building, and this is when we would act. But we're small and nimble, so we can move quite swiftly in these type of things. Technology definitely is a predominant part of the business, and we're all going to be aware of it. And I'm sorry, I'm coming back to what Raja says, because I think she's so right with her strategy. Today, with the technology companies that we are seeing and that we're investing in, one thing we have noticed is the business plan has shortened tremendously. We can't count on long-term business plans anymore, because the technology is moving so fast that a company that we thought completely invulnerable in the past suddenly is risking bankruptcy. If we were to take, as an example, I always like to use examples, we now know Tesla, NIO, and all these big new companies of electric cars have reached stage 4 or stage 5 of self-driving, which means that tomorrow, your car that is a liability today could become an asset. As 70% of the time, your car is standstill, it doesn't move. It's either at your office, your house, or in the supermarket, at the doctor's, whatever it might be. If the car is 4 to 5 times self-drivable, we could imagine a situation where you could rent out your car while you're at the office without having to move it. By the time you get back from your office, you go home, you plug your car into your home, and any energy that hasn't been consumed, you can sell on the grid. Now, I'm saying that because let's now look at Uber and taxis. How is that going to affect their business plan? Uber's not that old as a company, but their business plan today with this new technology could take a serious hit.
It's very interesting, yeah. Can I just tell you an anecdote, maybe?
Yes, please.
Just to sort of remind ourselves of the importance of social and behavioral considerations when we think about innovation. So about 30 years ago, a VHS cassette became very prevalent, and everybody was buying VHS recorders and watching VHS films and so on. And at the time, I remember that the traditional cinema, cinema hall was pronounced dead. People said, that's it, it's the end of the cinema. And a lot of them were sold off. A lot of the big cinema complexes lost money and so on. But of course, people like to gather. They like the social interaction. They like to leave the house and go out. And eventually, after a few years of demise, cinemas came back unexpectedly. And so what I'm trying to say is, we should be wary of over-interpreting the consequences of COVID. I don't personally think that the changes are as radical to our behavior as possible, because people really, I know from my office and my colleagues, people want to come back to work because they like to leave the house, they want to see their colleagues, they want to sit in the same room and share, gossip and so on, as well as have face-to-face meetings. So I think, yeah, there is of course a lot that's changed, and as Rida has just told us this fascinating analysis about the car business. Still, let's not forget the human dimension, the social dimension.
I would totally agree with you, and but it's just the point was more on the basis. I don't think Uber will disappear, like the cinemas didn't disappear, like many of the high street shops when e-commerce didn't come. But as Raja was saying, and I keep insisting on Raja, I'm sorry, but the strategy is our path forward. And all these have to be taken into account to tweak, not completely change, but tweak our business plan and our strategy to adapt to the new world.
Totally.
And find something that will do better.
Totally agree.
Yes, I totally agree with Omar, by the way. Going to school is not only learning lessons, just also playing with your friends, or going to office is not just only doing work. So people also miss this. And also one of my friends also told me that sometimes people want to forget the bad memories. If something will remind us pandemic a lot, so maybe during the pandemic we have done something too much, but after everything is over, we will not want to do it again. So we shouldn't judge too early, maybe. So Raja, I want to come back to you again. People started working from home, but now some of them are going, or like digital transformation has changed everything a lot. So when you look at future, what do you see? How many of these will be like permanently change or temporarily change our behaviors? And also a second question, did the way of doing business of family offices, did they change with the pandemic?
The formal offices, you said?
The family offices.
Female offices?
Family.
Okay, family offices, okay, sorry. Okay. Now, of course, technology is something that will stay with us. That is no doubt. There's no doubt about it. How this technology would serve us is the question. Now we just woke up one day on the 10th of March, and the whole world has changed because of the announcement of the pandemic. The whole world has been like cut off from each other. So what has the first thing that people has done is really wanted to connect with each other. But the only mean that they have is this technology. So we have seen a boost up in Zoom and Teams and so many forums. That these forums has really helped us in connecting with each other. Would it go when the epidemic khalas finish? I don't think so. I think it will stay. It will stay with us, and it will be enhanced. People today have realized some advantages of that technology. Yes, it has kept them apart socially from each other, but it has provided them with so many other means. Education, for example, I know that in our countries in here, we are not fully prepared. We were not fully prepared for the pandemic. But the infrastructure mainly was there. So we had to enhance it here and there, and we continued our path with that, with the technology. That is online learning, online working, online socializing, online courses, even the facilitation. I'm doing my training and facilitation through Zoom as well. So the technology is there really to stay. Now, technology will change in terms of it will provide a means for the businesses to really take the advantage of technology and apply it to something else. I meant in here the student today who has enjoyed the benefit of really doing things without the hassle of going somewhere. Now this is taking off the social part, would really want that technology to serve him better. In what sense? This technology of Teams or Zoom has to be more advanced in terms of getting to virtual learning, getting to amalgamated real virtuality. So in that field, they would be able to learn and to act together and to really learn in a better way, maybe even. With this thought into our mind, the student will be a global student, meaning that there will be competition between schools, not anymore that it is restricted in one area. The student would be able to choose whatever school across the board he will be interested in. And that school has to provide him with a best system, with a competitive teachers, with a very, very competitive framework that he should work in. So the technology will stay with us, it will serve us better, and I hope that only the social part would be acted on in a different way. I hope I have answered the question, or there's some
No,
part
no,
that I have missed. Okay.
no, that's all good. Thank you. Omar, any comments about technology or Raja's comments or previous talks?
Just again, I think just to not to want to pour cold water or to to be too pessimistic, but I think that we need to think about education in a much broader sense. The model that Raja has just outlined could work amazingly for exceptional students, but it could be a catastrophe for students who have special needs, or for students who need who need the school as a refuge or as a place to socialize. And let us not forget that, most of our education actually is done outside of the classroom, in the interaction with others, with other students, and the sharing of experiences and so on. So, and of course at home. So we again should really be step very warily in when we think in this kind of utopian way about technology.
Yeah, sorry. I I fully agree with you, Ahmad. The social, that's why I said the social, if we take the social part outside, the social part is really very, very important. And as I said, I mean, the first thing that we have talked about is how to reach to each other, how to communicate with each other.
Yes.
The students, especially the children, they will really learn things for their behavior, for their life, for their lifestyle, and their networkings and their communicating with each other, maybe more than what the teacher would teach them in the classroom. I
Yeah.
fully agree with you. But
Yeah.
the technology would serve us.
I say this because, we are guilty, guilty, we did our job, of building part of the new Kuwait University complex in Shadidia in Kuwait, just outside Kuwait City, which is the largest university complex in the Middle East, or in the Gulf at least. And the reason it's so large is because of segregation. So, and for every academic building, there are two, because there's one for women and one for men. And for me, this is a metaphor of wastefulness, and of of this kind of gap in communication, and I think of technology potentially as resolving this to a very, and it does, because the young women and men, they communicate through TikTok and Instagram and what have you, but at what cost? It's very, very grave for me. Social cost and so on.
If I may, Amar,
Yes.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And let's face it, it's humans' nature. We need to get together. We need to communicate. And no matter what technology comes, we will always do it. The pandemic, I think, shows you humans are incapable of staying alone. And it has severe psychological ramifications when they do. So I would agree 100% with you on that one. Sorry, I thought I'd just mention that.
Good. I'm glad. I hope we I
had something
face soon.
Please, I mean, for a moderator, to be honest, it helps a lot. I mean, because if it's more interactive, it is more than welcome. Please comment from the previous thoughts. Hala, in the beginning, we mentioned about sustainability and Dubai Expo. Themes are sustainability, mobility, and opportunity. So in terms of sustainability, what should we understand from sustainability? And as a company, are you any targets in terms of sustainability?
I think, Kenny, there are 2 points which maybe Rida has mentioned previously. One is being there long term, which is, I think, every idea of every business family in this region. And so I think there's always a willingness, or you put yourself out there to make sure that you're there, and you can cater to the needs of whether it's customers, governments, going into certain collaborations with PPPs and stuff like that, which is, I think, a lot of the future in this region lies in the private sector's hands. So I think there's a lot of partnerships that will come out when oil isn't such a dependency in this region, and the public sector accepts that the private sector becomes their partner many times. So I think that will be a coming trend, and it's a trend that people need to accept, and governments need to accept. And also, like I think Omar or Rida said earlier, that a lot of people are dependent on this governments giving them their house, their government giving them all these kind of communist type of thinking, where the government has to provide us everything and it's all right. It needs to kind of go into the human education at a younger age and get incorporated into more of having entrepreneurs out there, having more people that are dependent on themselves and their livelihood to be able to keep up the sustainability of our region as well on a global scale. So I think sustainability is obviously, it's company wise, it's region wise, it's government wise, it's economically also, we need to look at that. So there's a lot of different levels and different I would say factors that people need to look at, and I do believe that education and entrepreneurship and an ability to stand on the public sector's 2 feet on their own is very, very important to sustaining economies and businesses long term. So that's my personal intake.
Thank you, Hala. Rida, I want to come back to you. In this kind of period, should family offices cooperate each other, or family offices should cooperate with the government or the state? Which one is more feasible?
Okay. I do believe that they should cooperate with both sectors, the state and other family office and the private sector. Anything that can make a business or a program, doesn't have to be a business with monetary behind it, more efficient, and can get our youth educated in the way that they should be to face what's coming to us, be it technology, pandemic, or whatever, there has to be a collaboration between all parties. Because at the end of the day, we all end up being more or less stuck in a box when you're in a company or when you're in a government or something. And we tend to take this liberty of not imagining what else could happen, or restrict ourselves from talking to many different people, like we're doing on this panel. We all come from different places, which helps us enormously get new ideas. If we're not talking to each other, be it public or private, we will stagnate. So definitely all should be done for that. And yes, I join the panel in saying education is really the key. We need to educate our youth, and those that don't have the means, we need to provide it for them, because an educated population will make the whole country move forward. It's an asset. Our youth is an asset, and like any other asset that one would have, you need to maintain it, push it, change it, modify it, so that it can be best equipped to face what's going to come in the future.
Thank you, Rida. Omar, you want to comment? Or?
Yeah, I think no, absolutely. The process is going to be very tough and arduous. I speak about from experience of Kuwait, where, you know, in a way, the country is like a large family office, because people, the citizens, have become so dependent on the family trust, and it's now become very impossible to wean them off this. And so a lot of the political infighting now between our parliament and the government and the state is about this process. How can we raise taxation so people become more responsible? How can we lessen the dependence of individual citizens on the state for housing and health and so on? And not consider this as a right. You have to also have duties. You have to be productive, and you have to pay your taxes. And this concept, which is alien to both to the sort of modern Gulf state, as well as to the sort of family, to the traditional family, is difficult to understand by many people. So it's going to be painful, and it is painful already. I think the same is happening in Saudi. It's probably happening in other places, but it's that model of dependence has to change. We have to become citizens rather than children of the state.
I think we are in last 10 minutes. I want to ask you, Mohammed, by the way, I mean, are we going to take any questions?
Yes, we have quite a few questions from the attendees, and I have a couple of questions myself. So I'm going to jump in with my own questions before I take the attendees, because I'm selfish that way.
Okay, but can you just give us little?
Go ahead.
Okay,
I want
to take then ask my panelists last takeaways. I mean, people who are watching us should remember this when we finish this conversation. Very short, briefly, Raja.
I would emphasize what Omar and Rida has just said. We need to collaborate with each other. Business families need to collaborate, and we need to collaborate with the government as well. After all, the government is the regulator, and of course, we really need to collaborate with it in terms of the whole thing, and in terms of projects, as Rida has said. We already have started long-term projects between the government and the private, and I hope that this is continuing. I hope that the businesses in here not only would support each other at each of the countries, but would really support each other across the Gulf. After all, we are a small nation. Let's collaborate with each other from all the Gulf states. Being the businesses, the type of businesses, we can support each other. There has to be a unity between us. This is what I want really to stress in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar.
We need to strengthen the public sector. We need to collaborate with it, but strengthen it through a different concept of citizenship, and that will have political as well as financial consequences. It will mean that people will require more political rights, but they also have in return to expect to give more service to society. And we need to ensure, because COVID has taught us this, as I said at the beginning, that the education, training sectors, but also the health sectors and the business, small business especially, support sectors are properly supported through the public sector.
Thank you. Hala, take away.
I mean, we have some great speakers. I think we've been able to learn a lot from each other here. And I would like to just re-emphasize the same points. I think our region and the world is going through some major changes. There are always opportunities when changes come. So like, you know, for example, we're here all talking today with people looking at us from the different parts of the world and joining us and joining our thoughts and our minds and being here a part of our vision. So it's I think it's important to have such type of you know, interactive sessions. And like Amar said earlier, you know, people need each other. They need the personal touch of others, and they need to learn. It's part of human nature and human growth. So I think that this is an important part of the world that came in the right time, you know, and maybe, you know, Corona came to everybody, anyone, without religion, without race, and it also connected us without religion and without race. So I think that that's the way we should take that takeaway from here, and, you know, be able to you know, take that for the future of our children, and making them able to connect to people in a way where they learn and they take the best out of this technological advancement and leave the bad part away, you know, and that's what I would like to say.
Thank you, Hala. Frida?
Thank you.
I think if I were to leave something today, I agree with all the panel, and I would emphasize on the education again, but I would emphasize on the human way of doing business. We need to educate our citizens, our youth, our future generations. The future is in the humane way of doing business. We don't need to squeeze till the last penny of profit. We don't need to always do projects that are purely concentrated on the profitability in money. Profitability can be in different ways. It doesn't have to be money. It can be in education, it can be in helping a community, it can be in helping a program, whatever it might be. We need to be passionate about what we do. We need to listen to everybody and remind people that the human way of doing business prevails. We cannot have Wall Street and these big companies dictating us that the only thing that counts in our life today is to make money so we can shop. No, our security, our well-being is to protect our families and our future generation. And that doesn't evidently mean that it has to be maximum profit. We can reduce our profits and give more income to the lower class. We don't have to always push the maximum. So if I leave something today, it would be the human way of doing business.
Thank you, Rida. And I want to thank to all my panelists. Mohammed, you can ask your questions. And also you said there are lots of other questions.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ersoy. So I'm going to start with everyone else's questions, just to make sure that we get them out of the way. We have, how have your family offices navigated the current crisis and its aftermath? I think a couple of the panelists already answered this question. Mr. Rida already answered it. Ms. Raja already answered it. Mr. Omar Al-Qattan, since you're in construction, and Ms. Hala Muayyad, how did you guys navigate this crisis?
Hala, please.
I think I would go back to like what Mr. Zayani said. You know, I would say that we navigated it thoughtfully to the human aspect, and thoughtfully to the efficiencies, and we tried to not get rid of anybody during this crisis. That was an important part of our ethos, human ethos, and I would say that, I mean, the crisis is not over, and we're still in the middle of it, and many sectors are affected worse than others. So I think, like Mr. Rada said earlier, you know, look at how you can help others in this and during this time, and the areas which are affected the worst, like tourism or you know, restaurants, and certain areas are affected much worse than others, you know. And I think we need to extend our support as people to, whether it's emotionally, whether it's financially, whether it's within education, whatever it might be, to those who need that support. And this is a time, you know, humans show their ability to connect and to contribute to society. That would be my takeaway.
Yeah, I think just briefly, you know, we believe in the principal capital of a company, and especially in a company that requires highly skilled engineers and others. The key capital is human capital. So what we had to do was to really garner all our resources to preserve our team. And we were successful in doing that. We were also lucky because we had work when many other companies didn't have work during the 2020-21 period. And going forward, I don't think it's looking very good. I think we work in the large construction sector, public construction, and that's, you know, because of the financial squeeze of COVID, it's going to affect the ability of governments to spend on capital projects. So we will have to keep patient and keep the core people, the most important people, on board as long as we can, while also protecting the least protected of our employees. You know, the lower ranks who are more vulnerable in these times.
The squeeze is not going to be over anytime soon. I think like 2022, 2023 is what everybody's predicting. Maybe 2023 is more realistic. Are you guys thinking of any alternative revenue sources at the moment? Especially you, Mr. Omar, being more in the public construction spaces, being dependent more on government projects?
We're trying. I think that the spending squeeze will be on the private sector as well, especially that, you know, most of the construction that happens is in retail, you know, complexes and office buildings, and these have been affected, as you know, very badly. So it will be a while before that activity is rejuvenated. So yeah, we have to sit tight. We've been through this. I think Rita mentioned the wars and so on. You know, we had the Gulf, the invasion of Kuwait, then the sort of 10 years of recession following that, when the price of oil collapsed. We had the 80s and the crash in the stock market in Kuwait. Again, we had like 8 to 9 years of very tough times. But if you're conservative and you keep your people around you, and you know, we're now 57 years old, so hopefully we can live this out again. We'll see.
That's great. Mr. Rida, I wanted to ask you personally, what, in terms of, you guys have been, as a family business, in business for 100 years. This final crisis of Corona, what does it remind you the most of? Or maybe you weren't alive during the World War I. What tales does it compare to any of these crises?
It compares in the actual harm or the psychological effect that it has on people. But no, it's not comparable. I mean, there was a scare of AIDS in the 1980s. We've had a few SARS in the past that started to scare people, but nothing quite as such. I think the biggest worry is that we're not going to go back to 2019. This pandemic has permanently changed our way of being, and we're going to have to get used to that. And I use a very simple example. If today it's someone's birthday, who's going to bring a cake with candles and have them blow on it and we all eat it? You know, it's something as simple as that shows you that there's something that has happened. This pandemic has happened, and we are going to be affected it, and we will come out of it in the right way, like we come out of everything. I often hear during any crisis, Omar was just talking about the '87 crash of Wall Street, be it the Mexican crisis in '94, be it the 2001 internet crisis. And every time we've hit a crisis, you have a lot of people say, yeah, but this time it's different. It's not different. It's a crisis. We know that we together can work and get over it, and we will. It doesn't mean, though, that another crisis won't come, maybe the coronavirus or the coronavirus. And there's a lot of things that the world is going through. We've got icebergs melting at such a speed, we don't know what type of viruses have been caught up in there and that are now being released. So in effect, yes, it is a bit different, but it all ends up being the same. The way you react to a crisis, be it a pandemic, be it a crash, be it a war, at the end of the day, the intrinsic attitude that humans have always end up prevailing, getting together and surmounting it. And tomorrow we'll be talking about the COVID vaccine like we talk about the normal flu vaccine. But I agree, this is going to take time. It's not finished this year, nor the next, nor the... Bloomberg did an analysis where they calculated how many vaccines are being produced, etc. And to get herd immunity with their algorithm, they came up to 7 years, which is quite a long time. Now, I don't believe we're going to be stuck in this for 7 years, but definitely for the next 2-3 years, we have to be on our guard and keep all the things that the governments have been telling us to do.
Wow.
I hope I answered the question. I didn't go on a tangent there.
No, you did. You did. I just wanted to ask you another question. Since one of your core family businesses is in textile,
yes.
One of the major areas that's faced disruption over the past decade.
Yes.
How are you using that experience with that disruption in the disruption that's currently happening in all phases of business?
Well, it always comes back to the same thing, and that's why I've called on Raja quite a lot. It's the strategy. You have to have the strategy, and the strategy has to be changed constantly. I tell the people that work for me, or with me, sorry, every morning, take 5 minutes to think of exactly what you're doing in your life, be it in your business, in your family affairs, in whatever it might be. Just go through your life in a 5-minute flat and ask yourself the question, is what I'm doing still valid today? Is my strategy still valid? Am I going to get to where I want with what's happening today? And you'll find that every so often, something that we were 100% sure about not more than a few months ago, suddenly we have to put it back into question again and restart from scratch. And this is why I keep mentioning Raja's complete involvement in the strategy and having to change it and constantly tweak. So any crisis, be it the textile crisis, we moved into textiles whereby we tint clothes without polluting, which is one of the biggest pollutions. So we adhere to the new way ecology, but we're still keeping into the textile business. All the businesses that we have, no matter what comes to it, we will be constantly changing to adapt and make ourselves more efficient for what's going to come up.
That's great, Mr. Orla, that's great. I'm going to go back to the questions from the attendees. How can family offices work together when budgets are tight, markets and spending have been affected by COVID? So basically the question says, how can family offices work together to get better together? Anybody can take this. Mr. Omar, you're itching. Go ahead.
No, not at all. I mean, the obvious question is if there are, business is business. It's these family offices are there for investment purposes most of the time, and if they have a common business idea, then they will be able to collaborate. I can't see any other way, except, of course, in the non-business sector, which is in the non-profit sector, and that would be very valuable. But again, there need to be common goals, common interests for that to happen.
Ms. Hela, you guys never collaborated with any other family office on a project?
Yeah, we have many times actually. I've collaborated with family offices from India, from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from Oman. We've done many collaborations, and I think what Mr. Omar said is spot on. You know, you have to have the unity of thought, of the mindset, and an ability for a win-win situation for both family offices. If it's business related, and if it's not business related, obviously it will be towards a common goal, whether it's a non-for-profit or a school you're developing or a healthcare system or whatever it might be that's non-for-profit. But definitely these forums are very important for families to meet each other, because many times, especially during a pandemic, you don't have access to new offices or new businesses, or you're used to, you get set in one's things that they're used to doing over the past 5 or 10 years. So I think these meetings, these collaborations, these events are very important. And I'd like to thank your group for bringing on different panels and people together on the same platform and sharing ideas. This is really important in terms of moving forward in the future during a pandemic. So yeah, we definitely have a lot of. I think I answered your question.
Yeah,
but we have worked with many families in the Gulf and outside of the Gulf as well.
I'd love to ask you one final question, since we have everybody from different industries. What are the industries that any of you would recommend to put on hold for now in terms of investment, and where do you go full throttle ahead? Mr. Rida, let's get started with you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, Julius Caesar said, when the population wants to sell, I'll buy. And when they want to buy, I'll sell. Today, you see the hotel industry has completely collapsed. They are in desperate need of investment. They're in desperate need of paying back their loans. And I believe the hotel business, which is something I've never touched, to tell you the truth, but it's starting to look quite interesting at this level. The assets are way down. If you look at a company like Belmont, which used to be the Orient Express, this company was just bought at 2.5 to 3 billion, when the assets, just the hotels alone, were about 2.5 billion. So at this point, they are probably way down. It was Bernard Arnault that bought it. And I assume that he's licking a lot of his wounds. But all the hotel industry is down. The hotel industry, in my opinion, will always prevail. It's going through a very nasty time. It won't be the first time and it won't be the last time. But I do believe that there should be some assets to look at in that sphere.
Okay, that's a good bold prediction. Ms. Hela?
I mean, things are affected in different ways. Maybe that's very broad, but like you said, there's always, I wouldn't stereotypically say industries, because I don't believe an industry is affected, but there's always an opportunity when something gets affected in a negative way. So I would say, always look for the opportunity or the silver lining, whatever industry you're in. And, even if, say, for example, I've had issues in our transport industry. We're quite heavily invested in automobile. We're trying to find, opportunities within the problem itself to find a way out of it. And, there will always be things moving. Technologies are moving. You have to look at where the opportunities pose themselves. You can see today the Maldives, for example, in the industries of hotels, is probably one of the most active places today. You can't find a room for less than, in a good 5-star, for less than 1,000 maybe dinars a month, which is maybe $3,000 a day. Sorry, $3,000 a day, which is still crazy for that type. And obviously the corona has helped them really launch a lot of their business lines and moved it to different areas, and been able to maybe launch a lot of platform for businesses in areas that have accessibility to outdoor, accessibility to a limited number of people, things like that. So I think there are industries affected, and there are still silver lining in industries that are affected, which you can always have to find and continue to look at and try to bring out of it during a crisis. That's what I would try to take from this.
Thank you, Ms. Hala. Ms. Raja?
Thank you.
I would think the hospitality industry or hospitality sector is really the one that has been affected, and I believe that it will continue to be affected for the rest of the pandemic. So you name it, the hotels, the motels, the anything, any gyms, these sort of things where you would have many people in, or people traveling to. Airlines is on a freeze. These sort of industries and freeze for the time being until further notice, as they say.
Thanks, Ms. Raja. Mr. Omar?
I'd sit on your cash.
Sit on your cash, okay.
Well, Amar, cash is worthless today. They keep printing.
I know, but
What's our cash worth?
I agree with you. It's just so frightening out there. I just if
Sit on your
anything,
gold.
I
Sit
think-
on your cryptos, whatever you have, right?
Yeah.
if anything, maybe the mantra now is to invest in value assets rather than the crazy growth assets like the Teslas and the Facebooks. So yeah, of course, the hospitality sector does make sense, but I think also cyclical industries that make things that people need all the time and that have been very unattractive investments, but now becoming more attractive because A, they pay dividends, and B, they're sustainable. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah, for the time being, I'm worried about a big crash, in another big crash in world markets. That's why I'm saying
Another big crash. You're predicting another big crash
there
in
hasn't
oil
been one.
markets?
There hasn't been one.
Okay.
And I mean, we can go in. I don't know if we have time to talk about the economies, but I worry. The fundamentals are worrying, and I think there's inflation coming. Public debt is huge. Corporate debt is even bigger. All these things are frightening to me, and maybe I'm very conservative. So I think I would sit on your cash, even if it's not paying you anything.
All right. With that being said, we're going to end this panel. Thank you very much, our dear esteemed panelists. It was super informative, super fun to have you all on. Mr. Omar, Mr. Ersoy, Ms. Raja, Ms. Hala, and Mr. Rida Lababidi. Thank you very much